If you were with us last week, you got to see us go out and geocache, which I hope if you haven't seen that video, you take the time to watch because you'll learn all about what geocaching is. And for the quick study, you can just go to geocaching.com. We'll put the link down below or up somewhere on this video so that you can see exactly where to go online to learn about that. But the reason why I set up this week's video by doing that first is so you already have your wheels turning of how you could use this for prepping with your own family. Stay with us because in the next few minutes I'm going to talk you through just a few ideas of what you might put in your own stash that you can hide as your own private geocache. Don't go away. One of the very first things I want you to start thinking about if you're new at prepping is this. It's possible that in the event of a crisis or emergency, you would be potentially, I hope not, but potentially stranded on the interstate somewhere trying to get home from work because a crisis has taken place, perhaps nationally, perhaps in the weather, I don't know. For you and your specific area, you might be preparing for something very specific like earthquakes or tornadoes or such, I don't know. But whatever that is, in your area, it's going to change how you create what we're talking about today just a little bit. But making your own private geocache is going to give you the ability to give yourself longer to get home, more supplies to get home from work to home. Where I travel from, it takes about 13 miles if I travel on the roads all the way to my workplace. Now, if I were to go as the bird flies, it's only 7 miles. I've mapped it out carefully. And also I've mapped out where each of the bodies of water are, each bridge, every railroad, all of the tree lines that I would need to perhaps pass through. It's important for you to study all of that and come up with a way that you would get if you had to go by foot from work to home or wherever you find yourself most commonly away from the house. That's the second most likely place that a crisis would occur is while you're at work or wherever that common place is. So find a way to get home, and once you've mapped that out, strategically come up with the ingredients that are going to work for you in your personal geocache. And then we're going to find a private place for you to hide that somewhere halfway along that route so that you have a shot in the arm, perhaps a blanket that you didn't have before, or something that you didn't have in your everyday carry, whatever it was that was right on your person. This is going to be such a boost of morale and help to you in the event that you had to do that. So let's talk through just a couple of the ideas that I have for you to think about putting in that personal geocache. The first thing you're going to want to find is the right container, and think small because the smaller, the easier to hide, the easier to work with that way. However, of course, it's the less stuff, so you'll have to be very particular in what you choose to put in it. I'm going to recommend something like an ammo box because they can seal down really tight and do a great job of holding just about the perfect amount of stuff. But you could get even smaller. This is a little airtight and moisture tight with a rubber gasket around it that makes it nice for hauling small things in. You could have your own geocache that's even this small, and that's not a bad idea. They also make bigger versions of this. So you'll pick your container first, and then you're going to want to think about those top 3 things: shelter, fire, and water. And I would strongly recommend, no matter what disaster you're preparing for, you think about those things first. So for shelter, and also for a lot of other things, heat and everything else, a little survival blanket like this is going to be a great thing to put in there. And you can get all different versions of them. Some are larger and some are smaller. This is a pretty beefy one that I ordered online. It's not just from the dollar store, but a survival rescue blanket is going to be your best friend to have in there. An even upgrade from that, if you have a larger geocache like this ammo box, is this, and I ordered this online. I won't unfold it right now, but it's fantastic. This is an army poncho in its own little pouch here, but it's an army poncho that can be unfolded to make a full tent, and it has the wonderful grommets on the side so that you can use tent stakes to put it down if you have some sort of way to tie it down. This is just a fantastic rainproof tent or raincoat. and is very wonderful for making a small shelter for yourself, or you could just sleep in it like a sleeping bag. All right, next, if you have some sort of cordage to use, that's going to help you make a tent out of whatever you've got for a survival blanket or that poncho, like I said. Next, we're thinking, so shelter, fire, and water. Have multiple ways, if you can, to make fire included. Here's a little lighter, and those are almost foolproof, but if it's really windy, you'll be really thankful that you have at least some waterproof matches on hand, or a striker, ferro rod. Have at least 2 or 3 options for starting fire put into your little kit if you can, because just depending on a lighter alone is not going to be a good idea in the event of an emergency. Okay, for water, you could have either the pills that are going to help sterilize water, or you could get yourself a life straw or a small little straw to put in there that's going to filter water really good for you. Those are excellent options. And also, it's wise to have some sort of a little metal version of something that you can put that water in if you could boil it over some fire and make it potable. Okay, you notice also I have in here some food items. I want to carefully give a disclaimer on food items. Anything you store is going to taste like whatever is next to it. Secondly, it might attract little kind of bugs that can get in there, or anything that might get into that geocache. It's going to have a smell to it, remember. So be very careful of this, and make sure that you remember what I say later, and that is that Ziploc bags for this situation are going to be your best friend. And don't pack things together unless you don't mind them tasting the same as each other. But since we're on the topic of food, I've got in here some wonderful hot chocolate and a little stash of some coffee. That would be nice. Also a Cliff Bar that I can put in its own Ziploc bag and then in another Ziploc bag, knowing full well that over time this is going to get so hard as a rock, but I can put it in some water over some fire, and that would still be a comfort food to me in the event of an emergency. Also, a couple of packets of beef bouillon and chicken bouillon. Man, that would taste good if I was traveling and I could forage for a few things along the trail and throw those in there and make a little stew. That would be fantastic. Now, if you have a really large enough geocache that you're making for yourself, you could even do something as extensive as a sealed container full of some beans and rice that you could pour in. But I will say this is very heavy, so you wouldn't probably carry it with you any further up the trail unless you literally had nothing to carry, and this was fine to have that much weight. But it would sure give you a source of some protein and nutrition halfway up the trail and be great. Some folks like to put an MRE in because MREs happen to be sealed already from the smells, so they're excellent, but they do take up a lot of space. So just think of all the pros and cons of everything. Okay, we've covered the basics, but let's talk about a few others. Of course, first aid is a fantastic thing to prepare for, and I've got a whole first aid kit. I think it has like 250 little items in here, but some that I like the best are going to be the small multi-tool, sort of like a small Leatherman that it comes with. That's going to come in invaluably in this situation. Make sure that you get one that doesn't have plastic parts, because it's amazing how quick plastic disintegrates. So get the highest quality you can afford if you're going to put a little multi-tool in there. And also I would recommend oiling it up really, really well and sealing it in its own Ziploc. Okay, there are other things that are all optional, but for surveillance, of course, I love to have a little set of binoculars, or even a monocular, or a night vision scope. Whatever you can manage to afford and put in there, you're going to be thankful for. A night vision scope would be ideal, but they are pretty expensive. Also, I've got, oh goodness, I could just show you all of it. A first aid book that's going to help you in that event. That's going to go perfect with this first aid kit that has all those ingredients, and hand sanitizer to kind of help with that as well. Also, at least where I live, we've got mosquitoes and chiggers and all kinds of little bugs that love to eat at me. So having some bug spray is going to be perfect to put in there. Now, I will say I grabbed this just because of its size, but I don't recommend you having aerosol in your geocache, because if this is hidden underground or in a situation where that's going to lose its aerosol qualities, you're going to have something that's worthless. So probably not aerosol as your first option for that. But boy, bug spray would sure be nice if I was on the trail. A couple of other things. A Sharpie marker can mark all kinds of things. It can help you mark where you've been or where you're going or where you need to tell someone else to go. It can help you pace things off. There are so many reasons why a giant permanent marker is going to be your friend in the event of an emergency trying to get your way home. But it's not one of the first priorities, so just consider that. Also, this is one of the things you don't want to miss out on leaving out of your geocache, and that would be a little stash of paper, whatever it needs to look like. It could be plain paper or lined, but then some sort of a pen to go with that, preferably a pen that works in any kind of weather situation, or perhaps one of those space pens. And you can get waterproof notebook paper, which is fantastic also. I have a little road atlas here. I have our ranger beads so we can find our count of just how far we've come, and that's going to help you a lot. Also this paracord bracelet that has its own little compass right on it, and another ferro rod and striker so that you could start fire, as well as a whistle on the side of it. I love those. Coming over here to hand warmers, you don't know what time of the year you're going to be finding this or needing this little geocache. So a hand warmer in there is going to be just absolutely wonderful in the event that it's in the winter. Carabiners are fantastic, and they kind of go right along with the paracord. They can come in useful for any number of things. Even if you needed to carry some of this with you and hook it to your belt loop or something like that, you can make your own little bag version of pouch and carry it right with a carabiner right on your person if you needed to. Okay, for sanitation, boy, Whizzy wipes are about as small as you're going to get if you're on the trail, and you'd be thankful to have some of those just for some fresh sanitation. But I would say this, if I had been 3 or 4 days on a hike trying to get my way home and I had not had a shower, oh my, would I be thankful to find these tactical bath wipes. There are 8 of them in this, and they're pre-moistened, and if that was in my geocache, oh, that would feel so good, especially right here in the middle of hot summer, getting all that sweat off of you. Okay, some sort of flashlight, but you'd want one that either has the batteries out of it or perhaps a hand crank flashlight that doesn't even require batteries. I have been amazed when you leave batteries in the car or anywhere out where they're at the same temperature as their surroundings in the regular outdoors. They drain so quickly. I wouldn't be surprised if the batteries didn't go dead just waiting to be used in just a matter of a couple of months. So consider that. I think I've covered most of it. Oh yes, here is some fishing line, and I've got fishing lures and hooks right in my first aid kit over here, but fishing line is fantastic for about 100 million different uses. And so having some of this would be great for setting up a small perimeter, for trapping animals, for fishing, for anything that you might need it for. So think strategically and get creative, but fishing line is one of those things that's just absolutely fantastic to use in an emergency and have in a stash like this. Lastly, I just want to talk about some sort of defense item. We've got this large knife over here. Really, this is just holding its place because I wouldn't put a knife probably quite that large in my geocache, but I would get the largest knife that would fit in there if I had like an ammo box. I'm going to try and get a knife that's as big as possible but will still fit. And the reason for that is because it's going to be so handy at using in the event that you need to cut through bushes. You're not going to be traveling probably on the open road right with everyone else trying to get home, and you're going to need to clear a path for yourself. You're going to need to make fire sticks and start your own fire. You might need to be chopping some wood a little bit to start some fire with sticks. That's going to be the closest thing you can come to a small hatchet, and you'll be using it for everything you can think of. Also, I want to mention firearms. There are many people who will have a firearm in their geocache. And I would just make this disclaimer. First of all, if you're going to have one, make sure that this geocache is hidden on your own personal property. If you were to hide this somewhere else, you would be mortified. You would not want to live any longer if you found out that someone else had lost their life because of your poor planning and putting a firearm somewhere out on public land where someone else would find it and use it in a wrong way. But if you do choose to store a firearm in some sort of geocache that you have, I would just say this: oil it really well. Secondly, make sure you include with it a small cleaning kit and oil right with it so that it's ready to be used again, and enough ammunition to use that it has some sort of use, because without ammo you can't use that gun or firearm. And then also make sure that you have looked into the correct way to store it, because you can vacuum seal these in plastic and store them underwater, underground, for years without compromising the usefulness of the firearm. But you must do it correctly, so research how to do that, and it's fantastic if you do it correctly, how long that's going to store and be something useful to you later. All right, the last thing I would just say are Ziploc bags are your friend for this. The more the better, the more sizes the better, and putting each item, you'll see me put everything in its own Ziploc bag before I put it in here. That's going to be valuable for a number of reasons, but mostly keeping everything secure against the other stuff. And if you wanted to throw in a few trash bags, those are also handy as a backup plan for throwing away trash or keeping smells from attracting strangers or bears or whatnot. And they can also make a makeshift shelter or things like that. So now it's your turn. There are so many options to put into your own personal geocache. Will you write in and tell us some of the things that might be handy in your particular area and situation? It's going to help the other people. So you might just tell where you are located, either in the world or in the United States, so that other folks in your area might say, yeah, hey, that would be handy if I happen to be in this kind of an area like you are. All right, we want to hear from you. Will you take the time to write to us, subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already, you know the drill. Share this video with somebody that you love that's just now getting into prepping and might be helped by it. And lastly, let me say this: will you make it a point to go out and intentionally be a blessing to someone today? Bye for now.
Before you go, let me share some scripture with you. This is Psalm 16, verse 8. I have set the Lord always before me, because he is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Now go spread the word.